Well, more than 20 vessels passed the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday. It's the highest number of ships crossing the waterway since the 1st of March, a day after the war began. The red dots and arrows you can see here on this live map are oil tankers. Those in green are other commercial vessels. Now, 5 of the vessels that transited the Strait on Saturday had cargo from Iran laden with products such as oil and metals. The rest were heading from Gulf countries such as the UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, as well as Qatar. Well, for more, we're joined now by Marc Weller, who is the director of Chatham House's Global Governance and Security Centre. He's also the program director of its International Law program. He joins us from London. Thanks so much for being with us here, Professor Weller. First of all, from your point of view, what the US did in seizing that Iranian cargo vessel, was it legal?
Well, that's a difficult question because the entire war against Iran is unlawful. If you have a war, yes, then you can declare blockade and you can seize enemy vessels that are breaching the blockade. But in this case, it's much more ambiguous because the war as a whole is unlawful. And therefore, to impose this kind of measure on Iran is very doubtful. In addition, of course, there's meant to be ceasefire. And a blockade is definitely an act of war. So Iran is somewhat justified when they say that this is inconsistent with the ceasefire that was agreed.
OK, so given all of that, how would you characterise the current legal status of the Strait of Hormuz? Does anyone ultimately have jurisdiction over it?
Well, the two coastal states, Oman and Iran, have jurisdiction over the narrower part of the Strait of Hormuz, but that jurisdiction is limited by what is called the right of transit passage of all other states. All other states have the right in peace and in war to use the Strait of Hormuz for its shipping without any interruption. So the Iranian argument that they will now use tariffs or tolls in order to obtain revenue forevermore is entirely unjustified and has to be rejected. On the other hand, the United States, too, is not entitled to impose a blockade in order to bring Iran back into compliance with international law, because that, as I said, is a warlike measure. And you cannot use force in international law to constrain another state to start complying with its own obligation. But of course, we are in this overall context of a highly controversial use of force in the first place by the US and Israel against Iran.
What legal recourse do affected states or shipping or insurance companies actually have with all of this?
Well, not really. If this is a war and the United States has captured an Iranian ship, then it will claim that its own courts can act as prize courts, condemn the seized vessel, and the US can actually seize it. But again, that is the kind of law of naval warfare of the past century, before we had a clear prohibition of the use of force, a prohibition of war between states, and the situation, therefore, is not as clear as it should be.
Are there any repercussions for either side here? I mean, does any of this really matter if they're not going to be held legally accountable for their actions?
Well, this is a means by both sides trying to constrain the other to come to a definite ceasefire. Iran has used the overall blockade of the strait as an asymmetrical means to, in a way, defend itself against the overwhelming power of the United States and Israel, and it has managed in that way to build up leverage in the upcoming round 2 of the negotiations. And then the US came up with their countermove, which is its blockade, to deprive Iran of any revenues from its own oil and other products. And therefore, really, from both sides, this is a means to get a better deal in the ceasefire negotiations.
If we can take a slight step back, is international law actually equipped to try and de-escalate a situation like this one?
Well, we've had the UN Secretary General, many states in the Security Council, all of the Europeans arguing for de-escalation. At the moment, we've had one step followed by another that has escalated upwards and has spread the conflict broader to make third states, including the importers of oil and gas like China, Japan, and others, to make them the incidental victims of this war. And I'm sure they will all be pressing the United States, Israel, and Iran to, in the next round of negotiations, try and come to a solution. And of course, the irony is that the war really is about Iran's alleged nuclear program. And it is unlikely that the end result will be very different from what Oman had nearly mediated on the eve of the outbreak of this war, a kind of solution whereby Iran can undertake a peaceful nuclear program, but under the usual international supervisions.
OK, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you so much. That is Marc Weller, Director of Chatham House's Global Governance and Security Centre. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.